I'd like to move to section 3 on the agenda, which is an update on our plan to transition the University of Alaska Anchorage School of Education's initial licensure programs to the University of Alaska Southeast and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And President Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chair Davies. We thought it important, given the critical nature of our teacher education programs, and particularly the very high priority we place on preparing strong educators for Alaska, doing so across the state, but is also, of course, here in Anchorage, to provide you an update, given that we were meeting anyway, to provide you a timely update on the progress we are making in the implementation of the decisions that were taken at your April 8th meeting. And so Paul Layer, the Vice President for Academics, Students, and Research, is here with Steve Atwater, the Executive Dean of the Alaska College of Education, to provide you an update. He did prepare a written document, which has been posted on the board's website, and so that is available, of course, for the public and for your read ahead. But I think it's important that these gentlemen come and provide an update for you and respond to any questions that you have that are not specifically addressed in this memorandum. So with that, I'll hand it to Paul. You can begin the presentation, and then as needed, Steve can present as well. So gentlemen, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, President Johnson, Chair Davies. We're here mostly to answer questions that the board may have. In following the decision that was made on April 8th, the president charged us with moving very quickly on making sure that come fall, there will be initial licensure programs available for students here in Anchorage, offered by UAF and UAS. And so to take steps in that direction, we've put together some ad hoc sort of teams, we're called Tiger teams, to take a look at various aspects and questions that have come up with regard to implementation of programs here in Anchorage. And so the intent with these teams is it's going to be very short-lived, very focused, so that we hope mid-June we'll be able to have plans in place and hiring underway to meet those needs and those curricular needs in here in Anchorage. As you can see, we focus on 5 areas. I think that these we've identified as the areas that need immediately to be addressed with regard to those initial licensure programs. And within the president's office, leaders will be the COs and vice presidents looking at those areas, but drawing upon expertise and collaboration across the university is very important, so that we have good communication about each of these different areas, and so that we can address them as we move forward. One of the things I would point out is that in our proposal that we put out for the April 8th meeting, we had talked about returning and taking a look at some of the secondary licensure programs. We will not bring those to you obviously today, but rather defer discussions of those until a later date, probably in the fall. But right now our focus is on these initial licensure programs and ensuring that the students have opportunities. The update, and I'll ask Steve to give a bit of an update of where we are. The team, we had an organizational team meeting yesterday to get these 5 teams moving forward. Already we are looking at there's transition proposals from UAS and UAF and UAA for how to meet the various needs here, and so we're moving quickly to get things in place. And as we look at the budget going forward, how do we balance out the funding is a big part of that as well. Steve?
Yeah, Chair Davies, members of the board, good afternoon. And as you know, this has really never been done before, what we're doing. So there isn't a set of assigned processes to follow. So we're establishing processes to make this occur. And as you can also imagine, it's relatively complicated. There are a lot of pieces that need to be addressed and a lot of pieces that touch each other that need to be sort of separated and then dealt with and then brought back together again. And so the effort to identify all of the areas that need to have attention and all the processes that need attention is the purpose of the Tiger team with the 5 areas. And so each of those areas have statewide and university level expertise to identify and then help us go forward to figure out how to go best to solve this transition. I did want to point out on page 3, we list a number of graduates, number of people that have transferred to UAF since the decision was made by you on April 8th. That number is 68. And I did not include the number of students transferring to UAS because that's not to necessarily be served right here, but that number is also steadily increasing as well. I do want you to know that more than 20 students have also transferred to UAS since the decision was made by the Regents on April 8th. So overall, we had 27 students graduate this week or last week who were scheduled to graduate at UAA but chose instead to go to UAS or to UAF. And so be aware that was successful. That was a very difficult transition to move people mid-semester into a new university, new program, but compliments to both UAS and UAF for accommodating those students and helping them to graduate in May as they had planned to originally. So that was good news. And then we'll see graduates in December and graduates again in May that have transferred as they move through their programs. With that said, I'm here to answer any questions. My role is to coordinate and to be involved with sort of all aspects of it without having expertise in areas such as facilities, but certainly I've been engaged with it all from the get-go. And we're pleased that we're moving forward, but I do want to recognize that it is a complicated endeavor that what we're doing. It's not a simple task. And we're optimistically hoping to be done by early to mid-June in terms of having everything set in terms of going forward for August. But we'll see how that goes. One final note is that what we're doing is going to be somewhat fluid in that we don't have a fixed number of students who have responded yet with regard to what's next. So what things look like in August, it may not look exactly like that a year from now. And my expectation is that the enrollment will just continue to increase in the programs that are being offered on the campus here at UAA. So to be advised of that, there will be some lag in regard to the transition. It won't be fully realized until I think at least a year from now. And I'll stop there for questions.
And I would also point out that if with regard to questions, we don't have the specifics on any of these areas yet because the teams are just now getting going. But for the June meeting, it is our intent to provide, and also at the Academic and Student Affairs meeting in late May, we will be providing an update and details on where we are with those processes. And for example, I just received today, within the last hour, sort of an update from UAF on faculty and staffing needs that they refinement of the original proposal that you saw from them. And so we are moving very quickly. Again, the teams are coming together and we should have progress here fairly shortly. Thank you.
I just want to ask a question to make sure that we are going down the track where UA is continuing to focus on a single consistent strategy for teacher preparation statewide. And I am asking about consistent strategy across the university. That is going to mean a great deal of change and a great deal of collaboration between the two universities. Mm-hmm. Because for the 5 years that I've been on the board, we've been asking for consistency, not only in the GRE courses, but also extending into your other courses. The problem comes up consistently in the legislature, as Reverend Sweet will agree with me that it's one of the first questions they ask. How do we transfer credits between these universities? And that happens, in my estimation, because of the lack of consistency of courses throughout. So I just want to make sure that we are going to have a unified strategy between the universities. That's point number one. Point number two is, there was a discussion of this in the last meeting, is what authority does Mr. Atwater, our executive dean, have? Right now, I believe he has a relational authority, but he does not have a positional authority. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't have the authority to make changes. You have the authority to ask if they will, but all that is just continuing in the turf war problem that we have. Fairbanks will not concede that we have a College of Education at UAS. The faculty there is just chipping away constantly, chirping about their school there, and it's just not good to have this turf war issue continue. And I'm hoping that this consistency thing will help to put that away.
Okay, thank you. One of the things, with regard to unified strategy and the transfer, the fact that we were able to transfer students in the last semester of their programs to other universities and have them graduate on time, I think speaks very well to our ability as one system to transfer students. The programs were not identical, but they mapped into one another, and we were able to accomplish what in many instances would not be possible to do if they were so much different. The other one is that in the plan that we're developing, working with Dean Atwater and with the faculty at all three universities, is to take advantage of the strengths of those education programs. UAS's strength is in online and distance education programs. UAF has more of a face-to-face presence, and we want to have both of those available to students moving forward. In terms of authority, maybe I defer to the president or to Steve to talk about that, but ultimately you did approve one Alaska College of Education with an executive dean. He has been working very well in collaboration with the directors at each of the campuses and with the deans, and so we are still continuing that. It is a relationship-based authorities, as you point out. But in making this transition, the president has also charged us with being able to move forward with decisions that will be implemented. And so, I don't know, President Johnson, do you want to speak to that at all?
I would. Thank you very much, Paul. Regent Anderson, with respect to the authority issue, we addressed that issue a couple of years ago and were, as you recall, constrained in our ability to clarify and vest this position with formal positional authority from the accreditation process and those standards. And so we modified and moved in a different direction. And while the executive dean does not have that formal positional directional authority over budget and faculty appointments and the like, he does have considerable influence. And in addition to that, he chairs the Teacher Education Council for the university system. As such, he is a member of the summit team, which meets monthly with the chancellors and the provosts and the vice chancellors and me. And when there are issues that are unresolved that require escalation, the executive dean has a path to escalate through the academic council and to me. And I address those issues with the chancellors and the executive council and then ultimately make a decision. So I think we have we have an appropriate balance between informal authority and the ability of the executive dean to pipe up and raise issues or concerns that aren't resolved or resolvable at a particular level. And I think that, for example, the charge memo, which I don't think we shared with the board, but there's a memo that I wrote that, is charging Paul and Steve, gives them their responsibilities for this implementation as an example of that direction from my office, so that issues are addressed there and there is direction from my office. Perhaps ideally, we would have devolved that authority to the lowest possible level, but given institutional accreditation standards, a couple of years ago, we elected to move in this direction. I would also note that while there are certainly tensions and there are issues among the universities in this area, there are in many other areas. And I believe that we work reasonably together to resolve those challenges, those tensions. And again, to the extent they aren't, we escalate those and get them resolved. So I think it would be beneficial and supportive of a successful implementation of this effort if we are supporting and encouraging all of our three universities to work together to get this accomplished. I know you would agree with that, but I think that that's the spirit we are working this, and that's what I'm trying to project to them consistently, the need to work together on this. Thank you.
I think as long as he only has relational authority is one of the reasons academia moves at a turtle pace. For us to move ahead and make some of these big decisions that we have, I would think that you would want to grant positional authority to this, or at least so we can get things done.
I tried. The Northwest Commission said no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It is what it is. So my question is in regards to the collaboration issue, and I'm wondering, through your Tiger Team approach, and you're looking at the whole system and serving our students in such a way that's seamless, how are you embedding the spirit of collaboration into that process? And are you having those conversations so that when the transition is complete, that you have the relationships in place between all of the university, all three universities, because you still need UAA as a strong partner. How do you ensure that spirit of collaboration that's in the best interest of students?
That is the challenge. I mean, it is in a system that has become, by its nature, siloed into three very separate directions. Bringing those teams together has been a challenge, but the people that are engaged on these teams have committed to be engaged in those conversations, and that they have agreed to approach these in an honest and direct manner to address some of these problems. And so we do need all three involved. And as we mentioned, UAA School of Education will still have the advanced programs for the near future, and they're gearing up towards an accreditation review. And so they will be engaged and they will be involved, and students will be involved in those programs. And so, again, a partnership is something that we are trying to build here. We invoke the School of Nursing model, where students at campuses are taking classes from UAA and... Sorry?
I'm sorry. This is Sherry. I just wanted to, did the meeting already start?
Yes, we're underway. We're on item 3.
I'm sorry. I thought it started at 1. I apologize. This is Regent Loretta. I just signed in. I thought it started at 1.
So,
go ahead.
Anyway, where was I? So it is important that we do collaborate on this, and it will be a challenge. Again, the nursing model I was evoking, we do have faculty, we have students who are taking classes from multiple universities who are getting degrees in nursing at multiple sites. There is, within the health programs, there is coordination and there's communication. We are envisioning similar kinds of thing for education. Steve, you want to speak to that more?
Yeah, Regent O'Neill, thank you for the question, and what you're asking is critical. It has to happen. The way to make it happen is to have faculty begin to share duties across the system and to not be siloed or just tied to their own universities, which means that the program alignment has to be such, or faculty assignments have to be such where they can begin to play a role at more than one place. This offers an opportunity, or begins to offer that opportunity, although the way it's defined right now, not necessarily the next step isn't quite there. We need to create that. I think the next opportunity to do this, and this is Steve speaking, this hasn't been advanced by the president or by Paul, is with the advanced program. And that the review that we'll be going through in the coming months, to me, offers a chance to let go of some of the identity tied to a university and to instead have a state level program that is touched on or supported at multiple levels, multiple universities. These are smaller programs, easier to get your arms around in a sense. And I can see faculty from Fairbanks playing a role with a UAS program or vice versa, or an Anchorage program, having faculty supporting it from elsewhere. So I think that is the model in my mind that we would benefit from if we can get that going right away. As a way to set the table for what would come with the other programs. The initial licensure programs are more deeply embedded in terms of letting go of that. And I know that's a goal for everybody, but that will take more doing. So I see this advanced programs as being a model to get to that.
And as we continue to work through this process, I'm just turning and looking at my fellow regent here, Regent Perdue. He heads the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, and my question is how's the Student Academic Affairs Committee? Are you going to stay abreast of this issue, and is there going to be a mechanism of reporting as we continue through the transition?
I believe that it would be my intention to do that and to have more interaction with those that are doing the work at that committee level, because we have a little more time, so that we would donate a good portion of our meeting to getting updates and asking questions. All regents are invited to participate.
Regent Parker.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. One thing I'd like to highlight is last night at the graduation at Kachemak Bay campus, one of the people who walked and got their bachelor is a UAA grad who got their bachelor in elementary education. So that was very nice to see. And we did thank her for continuing at their education and teaching our kids. So that was a nice highlight last night. And you mentioned students, and right now I see we have 90 or so that have agreed to transfer to UAS. We had 350.
Excuse me, that number is since the April 8th decision. Overall, that number is probably 150.
So we still have a couple hundred who haven't decided how to proceed? Okay.
I think that's fair, yeah.
Okay.
And what I don't have the statistics for the students that have opted to change majors here at UAA to pursue a different baccalaureate degree, and then from that degree perhaps move on to a teaching certification. So I know that some students have changed majors, and so that's another statistic that we're working on compiling right now.
Right. And I just want to make sure we're thinking about all the students that were
all the
impacted.
students, and there's a lot of students out there that have not decided. We're reaching out to each one of them and asking about their plans.
Yeah, and I know you provided some update with respect to faculty and staffing. One of the things I know Kodiak and Kenai have people that are assisting students on those campuses. Is that an issue that's going to be addressed going forward as to whether or not there will continue to be a person there to assist students?
Yes, we're very much, that's at the top of my list. In fact, I was working with Gary Turner this morning on that. So they're very much in focus with what's next for them.
Yeah. And then my last kind of following up on what both Regent Anderson and Regent O'Neill were talking about. While we need to deal and take care of the programs right now and get the students situated and squared away and take care of faculty and staff that have been impacted and hopefully still keep those core people that are essential to keeping the program going forward. As I mentioned in April, as we move forward with the college and the schools of education having a coordinated, streamlined, aligned program that no matter where you are, whether you're enrolled through UAF or UAS, it is the same program. You're just taking it at Fairbanks or through UAS. So, thank you.
Regent Hargeist, then Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, is it the same program? Every student that graduates with an elementary education, teacher education degree, if it's in Fairbanks or Juneau or Anchorage, is it going to be the same program?
As it stands right now, they are not identical. They are very close and similar. The credits do transfer, but if you looked at the course descriptions, the assessments, it's not identical, no. But it's the same degree, same number of credits between Fairbanks and Southeast for that program. But it would be wrong to say that it's exactly the same. No.
Is a credit hour from Fairbanks, Juneau to Anchorage, is a credit hour the same? When did you get that straightened out?
Well, a 3-credit class is a 3-credit class. I mean, that they count for the...
But is that based on a Carnegie unit of 60 minutes with 50 minutes of instruction?
All of the programs exceed the Northwest requirements in terms of contact hours. Fairbanks currently has more contact minutes per credit than does Anchorage, and but both of them meet those requirements at this point in time. But no, they are not aligned in terms of a 60 or 50 minute contact hour. So that is a difference across the system. Back to Steve's point, though, both programs, if you look at UAS or UAF programs for elementary ed, for example, both will lead to the same licensure. They both meet those requirements in terms of licensure within the state of Alaska. And so that they although the emphasis are different based upon the expertise of the faculty, they do lead to the same licensure and the same opportunities for graduates.
Well, it's interesting that a big topic of conversation across the statewide system in 1971 was what constitutes a credit hour. And as I can tell, that's been in discussion since 1971. And so I don't know what it takes to standardize things. I was hoping this statewide system might tend to standardize it. Education 101 should be the same requirements for instruction in Fairbanks as it is in Juneau, as far as I'm concerned. When a person graduates with a degree in elementary education, now in this system, they've spent all their time and gotten their instruction here in Anchorage. Conceivably, that could happen. Is that right?
That is the goal, yes.
What does the diploma say when they graduate? Where have they graduated from?
In this proposal and in moving forward, a student who would graduate from here would say University of Alaska Fairbanks. In the same way that a nursing student who graduates from Juneau, their diploma says University of Alaska Anchorage. So it is from the program that is offering the degree.
But now you're kind of making it sound like to me that there's a difference in that degree from one campus to the other. Is the Fairbanks campus different? What?
Then, well, I mean, Fairbanks would be offering the degree program here in Anchorage. Okay, so they would be.
So Juneau isn't having any part of Anchorage.
Well, or UAS, and UAS has their programs, and those programs are of a statewide focus right now. And a student could be in Anchorage taking a UAS Bachelor's of Elementary Education right now and graduate with a degree from UAS. And they will be, the students in the MAT program will be here in Anchorage, but taking the MAT program as they are right now from UAS. And so their diploma would see UAS.
Thank you.
Regent Purdue.
I do want to acknowledge everyone's contribution so far. And as you said, Dean Atwater, this has not been done before. So it is a remarkable accomplishment to have gotten those students through their program, whichever campus they walk through. I appreciate that tremendously. I have comfort in the fact that the president created a charter and that there is responsibility for you, Paul, and for you, Steve, to report to us the unvarnished good and the bad of what's happening, and we'll be expecting that as we move along. I don't see. I see if there's a structure for people who are subject matter experts to really work through the issue of what is being taught in what sequence. That it's not necessary for us as the board to insist that everything be the same. I think that's really a matter for the faculty to really work through, and that we have, as long as we have a good structure for communication, I think that's a legitimate forum for that to occur.
Thank you.
The one thing I would like to raise, which has been an issue that I've raised before on the board from my experience inside the university system, is the tuition and fee sharing model. So I think that many of us believe that the nursing model did not complete that work. And I understand it's a heavy lift to really think that through, but I would really encourage over the next year that you think through the issue of how to equitably share tuition and other fees so that the hosting campus, which in this case would be UAA, would have some reimbursements. And that model would maybe be a building for other things that we do in the future. I am still continued to be keenly interested in the early childhood issue, and I know that you're going to take some time to look at that, but I really wouldn't feel that our work is complete if we're not, as a board, hearing back a pretty comprehensive report on the early childhood issue, because I don't think we dealt with that adequately. Okay. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with the tuition and fee sharing revenue, as you see, it's one of the items there that finance is going to be focused on. And as you point out, we do want to create a template, a model as we look at other programs, whether that's nursing and right now we are sharing courses in engineering and other areas. And we want to make sure that we don't have sort of one-off agreements, but rather a structure in place that would facilitate and encourage this kind of interaction in the future. So that's one of the charges to the Finance Committee, and Myron is leading that discussion to see what would be the best model that would incentivize collaborations as opposed to de-incentivizing them, which is the system we seem to have now.
Thank you. Regent Sweet. I had students reach out to me from the US UAA, the student government here at UAA, and they were very concerned about really, really specific details that when I went and spoke to them about the way I voted and things like that I wasn't equipped to address. But I told them that I would pass them along to you. In terms of the best way for students with these kinds of concerns to get a hold of you, does that just look like emailing? Like, what's the best form for them to be able to contact you? I know that there's been a number of email communications directly to students in education programs who are being directly affected by them, but a number of students still have concerns who aren't necessarily within the program itself. So going forward, what do you think communication looks like directly with students? What is the best way for students to get a hold of you? Things like that.
I mean, I think for education-related questions, if there's students in the School of Education, either through the advisors that we would have in place here or through even up through to Dean Atwater would be very appropriate. For more general kind of questions, the students could come to me. It's somewhat easier to communicate if I'm communicating through the governance structure rather than kind of one-off emails from students, but I do get those occasionally as well. So other mechanism would work, but I think it's important and would like to encourage students to, if they've got questions, to talk to either the advisors within the School of Education or Dean Atwater or myself. Please, we try to reach the students, and we are try to proactively reach the students, but there are some that we're not reaching, and we encourage them to ask us questions as well.
And Regents, read on the FAQs that all the students have. There's 2 phone numbers, and one for UAS and one for UAF. I know that making phone calls isn't very popular anymore, but certainly we're getting them. And so that phone number is a good number to call. And so.
Chancellor White.
I think there's been a fair bit of conversation about universities not collaborating, and I think there's a lot of faculty who have really bent over backwards to work together on this particular issue, and I just I think that lots of people have had full-time jobs already, have worked really hard, I think, to make this work. And I think when I sat in Paul's chair and spoke to the board at every board meeting, I gave a presentation on various aspects that were part of strategic directions or whatever. And in each of those presentations, the slides that I showed all had a UAF, UAA, and UAS symbol on all of these collaborative activities. And there's collaborative activities in Juneau, across philosophy, and across academics, and across research. And as I think about the Coastal Rainforest Center in Juneau, it's a very tight collaboration with the International Arctic Research Center in Fairbanks. And anyway, I think it's important, and maybe there's an opportunity at some point to focus on all of the positive collaboration that is going on at the faculty level and at the administrative level that is benefiting students across the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Anderson.
Chancellor White, I maybe I'm just hearing the negatives, but I am constantly hearing about the pettiness of faculty not working together and fighting over silly little details. And I hear that over and over. So for you to say everybody's working together is wrong. But we have got to find a way of aligning the UA curriculum so that we have the same programs at all the different colleges or the different schools. Faculty may teach it differently, but the course content, I believe, has to be consistent. And one other issue I want to just bring up is is there who is advising? Is it a one-stop shop for advising at UA throughout all the colleges or all the schools, or is there a one-stop shop kind of a thing? Is there a good place for somebody to go and find the information?
Yeah, for the students located here in South Central, there will be. It's currently transitioning from the UAA advisors to a single point of contact. But at the S and F campuses, they still have independent advisors. There isn't a one-stop shop for those entities. But for South Central people, when they're on the campus here, they can go through the door and there'll be a single person there who would then send them on to what's next. So, yeah.
That track has to just be really clear to be best serving our students. And I think you hear consistently through all these Regents comments is we want consistency. I think.
Okay. Comment back here. We're hiding behind Steve, so I didn't
Good afternoon. I'm so sorry. Yeah, Maria Williams. I'm the incoming chair of Faculty Alliance, and so I just want to echo the comments I heard from Regent Anderson and also from Chancellor White that as Faculty Alliance, we've had some discussions. Of course, we worked on the GER alignment. That was a process that took about, 18 months, maybe longer. And now we're looking at issues, of course, block alignment, but also under the theme of inter-campus collaboration. So there is a fair amount of collaborative work being done. Some of that, of course, is under academic programs, but some of that is actually done under, for example, the Alaska Native Studies Council. This is day 3 of their Indigenous Leadership Retreat that has brought faculty from UAS, UAF, UAA, and the community campuses. So on a positive note, I do feel like there's some really positive inter-campus collaboration between faculty. So concerns, of course, I have as Faculty Alliance, if there's issues of some pettiness regarding some of the programs across the different universities. I think it'd be very helpful if maybe Faculty Alliance could take a role in trying to figure out a solution for that. So I just want to say I want to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria, can you introduce yourself to us, please? Besides incoming chair of Faculty Alliance? Yes, my name is Maria Williams. I am a faculty member here at UAA in the Department of Alaska Native Studies and also in the School of Music. And I've been here since 2011. Anchorage is my hometown. And my PhD is in music, specializing in ethnomusicology. Is that enough? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure you want to wrap this conversation up. Yeah. And I just feel compelled. Thank you, Maria, for your comments. Really appreciate them. But also I want to acknowledge the comments from Chancellor White, because I do think that over the years we've heard a lot about collaborative projects. And, we're in this time, as we've talked about, with budgets and making really tough choices. And so I do think, I know we'll be talking about the agenda. It's our last item. And I think it's going to be really important to showcase and to discuss some of those really positive collaborations that are going on. And just as we are all wanting to come together and deal with some of these difficult situations and decisions, but also remind ourselves the really great things are happening within the institution.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there are any other burning questions, I think I'd like to move on to the budget discussion. Okay. President Johnson.
Thanks very much, Chair Davies. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Interim Dean or Director of the program here at UAA, Claudia Dibdahl. Really appreciate that. And Maria, for your contribution, and welcome to this important role here in our Regents meetings. We're going to shift on and Ken is nodding his head knowledgeably. That means we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation. And yay! So this is how the presentation is going to flow. We'll touch on the purpose of this conversation here. I want to provide an update for you on UA advocacy. This is a really important stream of work and activity all across our university system in support of our budget. We'll update you on the budget and talk about specific plans that are being worked on for each case. And that's another word for maybe scenario or funding level, or perhaps to look at it from a negative side, cut level. And I want to take some time to talk about seamless student experience. And we're joined also by Dennis Jones. He's joined us in previous meetings. Dennis is the president emeritus of the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems. And he will be here to talk with us a bit about that seamless or common student experience that's critically important for our students. We'll talk about structural considerations as well. And then And again, this is intended to be discussion as we go through this. But I want to note before I get into the presentation, the appendix. The appendix is rich with information here, and it summarizes our goals and our vision. Normally, I'd want to start there with those things, but I want to kind of get into the meat of the discussion here on budget. But it's important that, and I hope you took the time to review the presentation prior to coming here and reground yourself in those goals that you have established and the vision that we have for our university. They're strong, they're good, and they really provide essential context for the budget discussion. In addition to that, in June of this year, you set out budget principles and priorities and strategy for us. And so all that we'll be talking about here this afternoon is in the context of work that's already been done, solid, good work by this board and leaders of our university. We're often asked, so why don't you just go raise some more money? We are working on revenue generation, and examples of ways in which we've generated additional revenue are provided for you there. And needless to say, we've been forced to reduce costs, and just some of the many, many initiatives we have pursued to reduce costs are provided for you. The compensation review, we've touched on that in numerous meetings, and detail about the process used for the compensation review and very high level results of the compensation review are provided for you there. And then finally, budget history by campus. There are 3 slides back there that summarize history over the last 5 or so years for each unit of the university. So there's quite a bit of detail there, and there's UGF detail by unit of the university over time, DGF another, and then total. And I think it's important that you have this information to clarify some of the numbers that get thrown around pretty casually. So for example, and I'm perhaps a little bit defensive here, people say, well, statewide's $55 million, with the asserting that statewide's $55 million comes from our undesignated general fund of $327. Well, that's more like $17 or $18 million. So I think it's just important to set the data record straight in terms of what actually is the UGF budget, the DGF and other, and then finally the total. So with that setup, I'm going to get right into the presentation here. I'd also like to note here the presence of Abel Bulito and Cindy West. I think she's still here. Maybe she popped out, representing United Academics. We have a long-time relationship, I think probably back to 1996 with United Academics. And while it wasn't touched on, it is in the memo on the School of Education update. We are actively working with United Academics. They represent the faculty here, and so we are working with them on those issues. We're working with United Academics on compensation issues. So a number of issues we work with them on. And I think it's fair to say that we share an overarching interest in the strongest possible university and and a focus on our students. So appreciate your being here today, Abo. So why are we here today? I'm looking at slide 4 for those of you who are joining us online. And that's, of course, to update you on where we are with budget advocacy and our contingency planning, and specifically a couple of questions that I would really like your guidance on as we go through the discussion today. And the first is, should we, in addition to any cuts we get from the state, should we cut deeper? Should we reallocate into strategic priorities? We have done this for the last 3 years. We've taken cuts from the state. We've cut deeper in order to invest in the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, the Institute for Social and Economic Research, K-12 outreach, the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program, and many, many other research, education, and outreach programs. So should we continue to do that? And that'll be a question that I really appreciate your feedback on as we go through the presentation today. And then secondly, while I have presented here some structural options for your consideration, I'm not planning to make a recommendation or go through any detailed presentation on those structural options. We've had these and others out there at most of our meetings recently, but I'd like to ask for your guidance, your leadership on where we might go in consideration of structural options for the university. I think you're all aware that the House budget for the University of Alaska includes intent language asking the board to consider structural options, in particular a single accreditation. So in light of that intent language from the legislature, I think it's important that we get some direction from you as to how you'd like to proceed. So the fun stuff, advocacy. Is Robbie Graham here? I think she is. So Robbie, thanks for joining us today. And Michelle and Robbie and Megan Olson here. And I'm probably missing somebody else who's a good communicator and part of the communication effort. Susan Foley, I think, is involved as well from the foundation. And thanks to the private donors who are supporting this effort. No state dollars are going into this effort. This team has worked together with a contractor and others to really put together, I think, a great advocacy effort here. And we're using a lot of social media to do it. That's how you can do things these days fairly cost effectively, I'm told by the experts. If we were trying to buy a lot of TV time and fancy video, et cetera, it'd be very expensive and it wouldn't send the appropriate message, set the right tone for our work in advocating on behalf of the University of Alaska. And certainly it's advocacy for budget, but it really is advocacy for a strong university. It's an advocacy for our mission. And so while, yes, we hope and plan that it will benefit us in the near term with respect to our budget, we're also looking at the long term and continued support for the University of Alaska beyond the end of the legislative session and on next year and beyond. So we have various tools, social media, et cetera. We've got swag here, buttons, stickers, signs, et cetera. And a lot of the signs, I picked mine up in Fairbanks at the Chamber of Commerce. And so we are partnering with the chambers and the economic development organization in each of the big cities to get this stuff out there. And then, as you've seen in the papers and in other places, you've seen supporters of the university engaging. You've seen them calling in. You've seen them writing op-eds. I think today, a Fairbanksan had an op-ed in the Anchorage paper. An Anchorage person, Joe Beadle, state leader, former executive here at the university, got a powerful piece put into papers statewide, and he also has been engaging directly, as have others, with legislators and the governor. We've got a Facebook page. Lots of people have liked it and signed up and are using it as a source for information as we go forward with the campaign. how we engage supporters, certainly reaching out to folks who've supported us in the past. And frankly, we have a lot of demand. I think in some cases, the demand for those who want to support us exceeds, at least it has a little bit, our ability to support them as they want to support us. But I think we've caught up to that. Many times people ask me, whether I'm at the airport or Fred Meyer's or at the Alaska Club, how can I help? How can I help? I want to help. So that's a good problem for us to have, and I think we're doing a good job of meeting those requests. As part of this, we wanted to understand Alaskans and understand what messages and what media would be persuasive to what audiences across the state. So again, with private funding, we conducted a poll. And a very solid sample. You see there 600 Alaskans, and that provides us the ability to get into regional parts of the state, understanding different regions of the state with some confidence. And I think the real highlights of the poll there at the bottom of this slide, 3 really persuasive messages. We tested a number of messages, but these are the top 3 here. One is that loss of educated, trained workforce will hurt Alaska's economy. The second is that our enrollment, if our budget is cut, will decline, creating unintended negative consequences. And finally, that tuition will rise, and that will negatively impact the affordability of our university and opportunities for Alaskans for higher education and for a good future in their lives and in their careers. Next steps in the campaign, we've successfully completed the first chunk of it and really approaching legislators. And now that we're near the end of that legislative process, as I note here in just a sec, we're going to shift and really communicate directly with the governor's office. And in addition to that, again, short term, but we also really see this as planting the seeds for a long-term, year-round advocacy effort for the university. If you go to Juneau anytime soon, Regent Anderson, you'll be heading down there at some point, and others here in the room will see this. So you can't get a paper ticket and get on an Alaska Airlines flight without seeing that sign right there. So that's there, and we're hoping to, I know legislators go there, and so we're going to be in their face a little bit, respectfully, but we're going to be in their face, and the faces of people who are looking at them are our students. So that's a very, I think, powerful message for us. We're putting our students first in advocacy for the university. Looking forward, this is not quite as appealing aesthetically a slide, but shows you how we think a little bit. So for each audience, key audience, what are the persuasive messages? What are the media that we use most effectively to communicate to that audience? Who are the effective messengers? And then when are we going to do this work? And with that, that is my subtle sign to Ken to share with you some videos from supporters that are being, and I'm looking to Michelle here, these are on the Facebook page. Is that right? Okay, very good. Thank you.
The university system is my future. I hope to use the degree that I get here to benefit Alaska for the rest of my life. The university system is the reason I stayed in Alaska. If I had left, I probably wouldn't have come back.
The University of Alaska offers a ladder for students like myself to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Education is a tool that people are able to use to achieve their dreams. And I think that the University of Alaska Anchorage allows students to get a quality, affordable education within the state of Alaska where they might not be able to find it otherwise.
Well, I knew going out of state was really expensive because my older sister went down to California for college and she was paying upwards to $50,000 a year. So if I was able to go to college, get a degree that was worth the same really, and only pay $20,000 a year and get benefits like the UA Scholars Program and the Alaska Performance Scholarship Program, I was going to take full advantage of that really.
The university system ultimately produces the workforce that our businesses hire. And the growth and success of our business community depends on having that kind of talent pool available to us to be able to hire locally and grow. So I think it's critical for the economic development in our state to have a university system that produces the talent that we all need as businesses.
We, Raven in particular, we're looking for more Alaskans. And we want to create more jobs up here in Alaska, and we want more Alaskans in those jobs. And the way to do that is to be working with a local university. In this case, having a local university that also has an aviation program is incredibly valuable.
In any business, it takes planning to expand, and it takes planning time to pull back. And if the university is in a pullback mode, they do need that time. And I think that everyone in Alaska needs to recognize that a valuable institution like the university should be afforded a little bit more time.
I mean, it's what has helped me find my career goals. It is what helped me refine my skill set. It's done so much for me, and it's really important because I know it can do so much for other people.
Because of the great dispersal of campuses, between Southeast, there's the campus in Ketchikan and Sitka and Juneau, but then we also have it further north, that everyone has access to education of some kind, whatever it is they want to do. So everyone has the opportunity to better themselves and to reach higher than what they may already be doing.
The university system provides the talented technical workforce that I need to run Denali State Bank. Our chief financial officer, our chief lending officers, many of our finance staff have graduated from the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
One of our biggest expenses as a company is trying to recruit and find good talent. And the more we can just find the talent in our backyard and continue to groom and raise local grown leaders and technicians for pretty much every department, every job, the university can help us fill a lot of the positions we have available right now.
I think that a strong public education system, especially for post-secondary education, is really important for just the infrastructure of a state or a country. There's been countries like Singapore that started out extremely poor, and as soon as they started to pour money into their public education, their economy started to grow and they became one of the richest countries in the world.
The future in Fairbanks really is dependent on the university system. We're getting our teachers, we're getting our accountants, we're getting our engineers, we're getting a lot of different professions from the university, and those are the people that are staying here. They're working in our community, they're continuing to contribute to our economy, and that's what's going to make Fairbanks and Alaska as a whole successful in the future.
The University of Alaska is a critical part of Alaska's economy, but also its social infrastructure, because we need smart young Alaskans to stay in this state.
An investment in education is an investment in the future of the state of Alaska. There have been studies, 80% of kids who go out of state for their education don't come back.
People are really relying on the university to make Alaska greater and better in the future for future generations down the line.
So thank you, Ken. And again, thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Robbie, and Megan and the other communicators for that good work. I note that there were two messengers, or two types of messenger, on all of those presentations, and the polling suggests that those are the messengers you want. Messenger 1, students. Messenger 2, business leaders and employers. And again, I think very strong support internally and from our students, and externally from influential employers across the state for our university. So very positive, and again, thanks. Let's see here. I am now on to slide 14. You've seen this slide, the blue and orange slide, we refer to it, and this describes what's happened to our UGF budget since FY14. I would note that if the FY20 governor's budget prevails, the cumulative impact to the university over this period would be $380 million, fewer dollars that the university has received. So this advocacy effort is critically important for us. Budget update, here's where we are today. The governor is at $193 million UGF for the university in two appropriations. One appropriation for our community campuses and the other appropriation for our universities. I would note, just for those who aren't inside players in this budget process, that appropriations are not a determinant of organizational structure here at the university. We have had multiple appropriations in the past and have not reflected those appropriations in our organizational or academic structure. That said, the more appropriations, the more administrivia that we need to deal with in terms of inter-appropriation transfers. So it is not an ideal situation. The House is at $317 million with a single appropriation and intent language encouraging the Board of Regents to consider a single accreditation. And the Senate is at $322 million in two appropriations, one for our community campuses and the University of Alaska Southeast, and the other with UAA and UAF. And all of these are, of course, down from the current year, $327 million in a single appropriation. As we speak, the House and Senate differences are being worked out in a conference committee. There are three members of each Finance Committee, the co-chairs of the House Finance Committee, who are majority members, plus one minority member on the House side and then also on the Senate side. And they're working through all the differences. We understand that they may be done with their work as early as Saturday of this week. Then whatever is agreed to there goes to the two respective houses of the legislature for concurrence and then on to the governor. We're told that the legislature intends to be done by May 15th. The governor at that point under our state law has 20 days to decide what he chooses to approve or what he chooses to veto from what the legislature has passed. So assuming that the budget goes to the governor mid-May, then it would be right around the time of our next meeting, June 6th and 7th, that we would know what our budget is. I have been talking here exclusively about operating funds. There is also, of course, the capital budget. We have included, as we have traditionally, a large amount for deferred maintenance. We have a huge deferred maintenance backlog. There is a modest amount, I believe it is $5 million in the governor and $10 million in the Senate, and the House had, what did the House have? I don't think it had anything in the Capitol. Did the House have 10? Okay, thank you. So some recognition of deferred maintenance in the capital budget.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question at this point? Does the university have any kind of reserve fund for maintenance? Is there any such thing?
Regent Hargraves, no.
So you depend on appropriations every session of the legislature to do your major maintenance and care for facilities?
That is correct. We spend considerable, we've been getting about $5 million over the recent years per year in the capital budget for deferred maintenance, but total facility maintenance is about $45 million a year that we're spending. Back when we were swimming in oil money, we were getting large appropriations from the state to try to chip away at our deferred maintenance backlog. But that backlog continues to grow in light of relatively small appropriations. But long answer to your short question, no, we do not have a specific reserve fund that generates earnings that is spent on facility maintenance.
So if in September a wind blew a $5 million roof off of a building, there's no money in existence dedicated to that kind of maintenance repair.
Regent Hargraves, we do have unreserved, unrestricted fund balance each year. So you might, it's money that is budgeted but is not spent largely because of reduction in personnel or turnover rates. So those funds often are used for that kind of purpose.
But there's no dedicated reserve fund for that kind of maintenance.
That is correct.
Well, you know, for whatever it's worth in this fast-moving session, that's something I would personally like to see the university start considering. how to get some kind of reserve fund in place for that kind of an emergency. I know that it's the trend nowadays in school districts, municipalities, not to have that. But I've always thought it was a terrible mistake to give up on those reserve funds for that kind of purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps speaking for the board has discussed that issue and that concern many, many times. That is a serious issue, no question. So a busy chart here. These are the cases I refer to, these budget cases. So I'm referring now to slide 16 for those of you online. And what this basically lays out for you here in the upper left corner, hard to read, I guess, on these screens, but this was really the Board of Regents' initial proposal for a budget increase. We were looking for $1.8 million to enhance our Title IX capabilities. And here we jump-started that. We got a report last summer from the Title IX community, our HR leaders and Title IX leaders from across the university, who said we need to get going now and not wait until the appropriation process is done. So we put in, I believe it was $1.2 million, something like that, to jumpstart a lot of this work. And it's important now at this point that we build general funds in underneath these investments that we've made. Critically important that they are. Strategic initiatives, this is what we have reallocated to support over the last number of years. These are directly tied to your goals: economic development, research, education attainment, workforce development, and cost effectiveness. Compensation, we've gone a couple of years without compensation increases, and this was in the budget request approved by you in the fall. And we'll get into more detail on each of these going forward. And then fixed cost increases, $12 million. And so what you see moving across the right of this table here is then what would we fund if our budget was cut by $5 million, the Senate budget? What would we fund if the budget was cut by $10 million, the House budget? What would we continue to fund if the budget was cut $30 million, which is less than a fourth of the governor's proposal? And what would we cut what would we do if we were cut $40 million? And what's done here, and this is to this big question here, what do we continue to reallocate? Do we continue to cut deeper in order to fund these priorities depending upon the cut level? And so what you see in this first scenario is that under the Senate column, we would be cut $5 million there. We would reallocate another $25 million. So you add those two numbers together and you get $30 million. And that's what we would need to come up with. That would enable us, one, to address the cut, and two, to fund these strategic priorities. And moving across, you see that as the cut goes up, the amount reallocated goes down. So we would be doing less investment in those strategic priorities. And that trend continues across this table here. So the deeper the cut, the less of your strategic priorities we would cut and reallocate to fund. And then moving down, looking at revenues here, what would happen to tuition rate? For example, we are already increasing tuition by your decision next year. We will be coming back to you in September with options for the subsequent year, academic year 21 and 22. But what do we do about tuition based on these scenarios? And at this point, under the Senate and the House, we are thinking that we would stick with our current decision to increase tuition next year by 5%. Again, a decision already made by this board. But if the cut is deeper than that, do we come back to you with an in-year adjustment for tuition? We're making predictions here in terms of enrollment, research, philanthropic support, and our net revenues, depending upon the level of cut. Then in terms of expense reduction, we are working on, and I commend the chancellors and appreciate their work along with their provosts and their leaders at each of the university to increase our academic productivity, instructional productivity in particular. These are often difficult issues, but we're focused on that all across the university system. There are task forces and other activities at the campus level. There are lots of steps and processes that are going on to increase that. Next up is looking at various structural and functional aspects. So we'll talk a bit more about this seamless or common student experience. We're looking to consolidate selected administrative functions. I think you're aware of the redesign of human resources, for example. Examining the accreditation structure in response to at least the House intent language. And all of these require program reviews and reductions for possible discontinuation, and then considering our community campuses and their organization and their role going forward. Now, this is where we get near to the bottom line here. There are only so many places to save money at the university. I began this presentation on the budget by looking back to FY14 to re-emphasize the point that we've taken cut after cut after cut. We are a people-heavy organization. That's where our money is spent. We're educators, and it's educators who we employ. And so in order to meet, even under the Senate approach, a $5 million cut and a $25 million reallocation and investment into priorities, that would be approximately 250 full-time equivalent faculty and staff. And we do a quick little assessment here. Of course, much discussion, much analysis would be done before going or coming to you for any reasoned discussion of fiscal exigency. But under that scenario, we think exigency would not be likely. And then an unallocated reduction, we haven't specified where that would come from, either at the system level or at the campuses of $5 million. And so I just walked through that example for you as how you come up with $5 million cut, 25 reallocation, 30 million, and then at the bottom line, 25 million of that would come from essentially people across the university system and programs that those people work in, and an unallocated reduction of 5 million. As you move across the slide here, we cut and reallocate less. And we gradually increase the impact on faculty and staff, and also increase the amount of an unallocated reduction. So those are the puts and takes of how we're thinking about it from I think the highest, most strategic level. And I'll pause here if there are any questions. And then the next step I would take would be to go into each one of these areas, Title IX, strategic initiatives, compensation, and fixed costs, and lay out exactly what we would continue to do at each one of these funding levels in those specific strategic areas.
You should point out the fiscal exigency change.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Chair Davies. As we move across also, the possibility and likelihood of fiscal exigency goes up. Now, when I describe this to you, I don't specifically call this out, but I think it's critically important to say that behind these numbers, particularly the personnel numbers, are real people and real programs. And so I think it's critically important to note that and remember that these are not merely numbers. These are our mission. This is how we serve our students. This is how we serve our state. And so as we move across this, while it may appear to be a rational, if you will, presentation, there is a lot of difficulty, a lot of complexity, and a lot of doing less across the university system with less resource.
I had Regent Parker and then Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. Two questions. One, under the expenses, the community campus potential reorganization. There's been a number of options that have been identified. Has this gone from the bottom up to be looked at, and have the community campuses been involved in this potential reorganization? And then the other question comes back to, we got the announcement the other day about the HR consolidation at, I guess it's going to be Fairbanks. What other administrative functions are you looking at consolidating?
Thanks, Regent Parker. First off, yes, the community campus directors and the chancellors have weighed in on options for community campus organization. I have met, and I think 2 of the 3 chancellors were there in a call with all of the community campus directors where we talked about these various issues. It was a very frank discussion and a very constructive discussion. One of the key takeaways that I got from that conversation was the really strong emphasis of the community campus directors on serving their communities. Of course, they're going to do that, but their strong interest in having availability, greater access to programs and courses from across the university system as a way to better serve their communities. So I think that's a real positive. With respect to the HR redesign, we're not moving anybody physically. It isn't at Fairbanks. Nobody's moving to Fairbanks as a result of this. We are restructuring how we deliver human resources services to our campuses across the university system. So it's more a restructure. It's not a consolidation. It is not a merger. It is not moving people into one big room in a place. It's redesigning how those services are organized and delivered to our users across the university system. Thank you. We are looking at others. I've asked our administrative leaders, those sitting in front of you here today, and I've also asked the councils. We have finance or business council, human resources, IT, academic, community campus, all of the councils. I believe there are 9 or 10 of those councils, research council, all of them for their ideas for cost reduction, and no decisions have been made as to additional areas for consolidation or redesign at this time.
Regent Perdue.
Yes, I have a confession to make, President Johnson. I'm having a hard time absorbing all of this information. It is so much, there's so much here, and you've laid it out beautifully. But each of these bullets have a lot of meaning to them. And so I guess, and not knowing what our budget number is now, of course we will know soon, what is it that you are wanting from us as a board so I can really focus my attention on what your next slides are going to be?
Well, the next slides go into detail into what we would continue to do in Title IX, in compensation, in fixed cost increases, and in initiatives across each of these cases, so that you get a sense of how we're thinking about what we would continue to fund, what falls off the list, depending upon what we get. And so I really think, I'm not asking, we're not here to approve a budget or anything at this point. This is just to look really at options and, more importantly, how we're thinking about the various options. And I guess that would be the single most important feedback you could provide is, are we thinking about this in a reasonable way? Are we missing something in terms of the framework? As opposed to a specific detail, because I think that would be less value. But the more important value is how are we thinking about this in a way that would enable you on June 6th or 7th to approve a budget.
And I think one of the focus questions is at the top of that slide, which is 16, which is, we have in the past said we want to focus on certain strategic initiatives. And in order to do that, there have to be some additional reductions across the system in order to fund those. So it's a reallocation. And one of the questions is, do we want to keep doing that? There are people that say we shouldn't do that. And so I think the board needs to re-examine that question, or continue to examine that question, or maybe a better way to put it. That's one of the big picture items of this. And that's what it's laying out is the details of that reallocation. Regent Hargreaves.
I'll have to admit this is a complicated budget for a small mind. I don't get a lot of what's in this, I'm sure. Is there any place to where you generate the cost per credit hour on an individual campus? Do I know what it costs to generate a credit hour in Anchorage as opposed to Juneau or Fairbanks? Can I determine what the cost of a credit hour is in Nome or Dillingham?
Regent Hargreaves, we can certainly provide that to you. We do not provide that to you in this presentation.
And it's not in any of the printed material you've sent to us or that exist?
Oh, it exists. One can easily find that. It varies all over the map. It can vary from, I don't know if it's, I'm going back a couple of years, over $1 million a credit hour to much less, given the size of a campus, given how many students, et cetera, et cetera. So it varies substantially across the university system, depending upon enrollment and cost of operating a particular facility or campus.
Well, see, my interest in that is simply that there may be some places that are just too expensive for us to maintain. Maybe we can't justify the cost per credit hour in some of these locations.
Well, I think what I would ask is, that's a very good point. And I think what I would ask from you is for us to look at that. I mean, the chancellors are very well aware of what their cost structures are across their colleges and across their community campuses. And I think it becomes a really critical mission question, right, and access question. If that logic, and I'm not suggesting, Regent Hargreaves, that you're taking this logic to the extreme, but if it were taken to the extreme, we would operate in probably one place in the state. We'd operate in the cheapest place in the state, which, of course, wouldn't serve the state. So that becomes an important consideration for us here. Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Any more questions?
So here we go into a little bit more detail, and so here's what we would reduce. We would reduce elsewhere in order to fund Title IX at each one of the campuses. You see down the side here, UAA, UAF, UAS, and then statewide provides functions and services with respect to Title IX, as you're aware. And under the Senate scenario and the House scenario, it would be, we'd make a total reallocation and investment of $1.5 million. And if we went out here to these two potential scenarios, more extreme, the total would be $1 million, and this is how it would be allocated. So you see less money funded at each level. This is put at the top of the list, however, because I think it's an absolute must-do top priority for the University of Alaska, given our challenges, given our history, and given the priority we place on this, and frankly, the progress we have made in this important area for us, for our students, for our faculty, et cetera. So this is an area, in my personal view, that I would recommend be a must-do, no matter what the budget is. But this lays out for you the detail of positions, et cetera. And this, again, came from the human resources and the Title IX staffs who said this is what we need. And one of the things we're learning in Title IX is that a lot of the cases are not strictly sexual harassment or misconduct cases, Title IX formally so. They're actually often HR matters. And so we see quite a few of those cases, frankly, being channeled off and becoming HR issues that need to be worked there as well. So there's training in here, there are investigator positions in here, there are reporting positions in here as well. So, yes.
So to the question of the reallocations, it seems like it's a mix, I'm guessing, it's a mix of ongoing investments that we've made, such as in the Title IX. These are actual people doing these work. And then there's some one-time activities that we've invested in for strategic purposes. Is that, so the answer to the question, should we continue cutting for strategic investment, might be answered best by ongoing activities versus things that were startups for improvements, and perhaps there aren't any of those. I don't know, but it would help me to know that as well.
It's a very perceptive question, and we intentionally excluded items that had been funded with one-time money. Recall that we took some of our unrestricted fund balance and used it over a 3-year period, and those have been excluded from this, and so that's separate dollars. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but good question. The next area here, again, a lot of detail, and I apologize for that, but in the interest of sharing it with you, the same kind of logic plays here. So the deeper the cut, the less is funded across the line here for strategic investments. There's a lot of detail here, needless to say, but what I've tried to do is tie these to your goals. So if you look at UAA, for example, under the Senate scenario there, you see education attainment, workforce development, and economic development, and then there are the specifics in parens as to where that would go. And those are all really key priorities we've talked about for a number of years. And of course, everything here was in your budget approved in November. So it's a matter of what less will we be doing. And so it was really a prioritization here. And so again, the priorities all across this table have to do with economic development and education attainment, recruiting, retaining students, supporting students, program development, research, and there are some funds at the system level that would support seamless or common student experience initiatives, and also some online program development in some key strategic areas where we either research-wise or educationally lead the world. And so the idea here would be to make a strategic investment in a literally world-class online course that would be advertised and broadcast nationally, if not internationally. We have not done that to a large extent, and so that's something we would be looking to do there. But again, as you move across, less money would go into each of these areas, and some of the areas fall off the list. Compensation, there's detail back in the appendix on compensation, just as a reminder. We've given you detailed presentations in the past, but I admit it's been a while, but some detail is provided near the end of the appendix. But what we've done here, so it would be $7.5 million under the Senate scenario. And there are the components there below, and this isn't broken out by particular university, as the study is really being led by the statewide Human Resources Office. The equity component there is really gender pay equity, and this is a legal requirement. We're not allowed, fortunately, to discriminate against people on some illegal ground, like gender, age, etc. So we've done a very rigorous analysis of compensation, faculty, staff, and our administration. And we believe that that's the gap that we need to fund, and that's not optional. As soon as we pin down those numbers finally, which will be very shortly, we will go ahead and implement those. That's not optional. Again, that's something we must do. Now, the good news here is that are particularly gender-based inequities are minimal across the university. I think we presented that to you about a year ago when we got our preliminary numbers. We were, I think, very, very strong on that, and this is confirmed as we've gone through and refined the analysis. Market, footnote 2 there, specific market, that is the amount needed to move specific individual faculty, staff, administrators to 0.9 of the median, not 0.9 of the maximum, not even to the median, but to 0.9 of the median over a 3-year period. The total gap is $6.9 million. Too much money to lift in 1 year. So we've divided it by 3, and we would be making salary adjustments over a 3-year period to bring people to that level. General market is for those individuals who wouldn't be receiving a specific market. They would be receiving a 1% increase to at least address partially the increase in cost of living that we've been experiencing. General inflation in Alaska over the last year was a little bit north of 3%, and so we're considerably lagging that. And then pension cap, this gets a little bit technical here, but we have an optional pension program at the university, and it is seriously lagging our market competition, the state in particular, and we're way, way under the IRS caps. And so we would, again, over a multi-year period, step that up so that we become more market competitive in our pension. And then all of this has a benefits fringe to it. So that's what that 1.9 is for a total of 7.5 under the Senate scenario. And then as we move over to the House scenario, we drop off the pension cap piece. And then as we move over to the this $30 million, we drop off the general market piece, or $2.8 million. And then over on the far right, we, instead of a 3-year transition to a more market competitive position, we take 5 years to do that. So that way we're still doing it, even though we would be a considerably smaller university there. Remaining faculty and staff would at least be on the road to being at a market competitive salary. There is a tension here. I just think it's important to note between a view that says we will, if we're a smaller university, we still want our people to be paid in a market competitive rate. The other view, and both of these I think have legitimacy to them, the other view is, well, why would you do that if you're laying people off to do that? Aren't we better off with more people who are perhaps poorly paid, but aren't we better off that way? So those are, again, two legitimate perspectives that we hear often. This approach supports or is reflected more of the approach that we want the people who are here to be paid in a market competitive way. Let me pause and if there are any questions or discussion from the board on this one.
So of the 5 items listed up there, equity is only the must implement, the others are optional. Is that correct?
That's correct, Regent Parker. Legally, right. Okay. So again, with fixed costs, this is the scenario here. So again, each funding level, this is what would be funded in terms of fixed cost increases in each one of the units of the university. So again, the same pattern. Some things fall off as we go over to the right with less money, and those that stay on are funded less. And you see here, facility maintenance is prominent all the way across.
President Johnson, I have a question regarding compensation. The study that we did, how long does that study stay current, and when will we have to go back out and update it?
I would say, I mean, typically in my experience, this is something I used to do a long time ago. Typically, you'll look at compensation every 2-3 years, something like that, to stay in touch with the market. You might look internally at internal structure maybe every 5 years or so. I think we do need to keep our eyes on things. Things get out of hand, you know, and individual decisions get made over here or here. Nothing evil or illegal or immoral, but things do tend to get out of hand. So it is important to come back periodically. The challenge is that if we're constantly doing it, then it becomes quite disruptive.
I mean, we have a lot of really important priorities to consider as we move through this budget process, but I think this is one that we really need to ensure that we keep our focus on. Not only do we have an obligation, as you said, with the equity, category, but I think this is something that as we look to figure out how we can continue to stay competitive and keep the folks that we need to keep, that is going to be a balance.
Thank you. So now I'd like to invite Dennis up to the table here, and I think this is a really important topic to take some time to talk about, is what is this seamless or what does this common student experience look like? This board has talked about this and thought about this and pushed for this for a number of years. And I mean, Regent Anderson refers to the Kodiak meeting in 2015, I think it was, or something like that, frequently. In any case, it is an important priority for us, and there are developments that have occurred not only here at the University of Alaska in response to your leadership, but also there are lots of trends across the country, and Dennis, of course, has his finger on that national pulse in terms of innovations in the student experience. You know, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to. I think we should take a real quick 5 minutes.
Okay, sure.
We've gone through a whole bunch of array of numbers and stuff, and I think we need to rub our blurry eyes for a second so we can focus on Dennis's comments.
Okay, thank you.
So
very good.
Give us 5 minutes. We'll come back at past.
Thank you.
I'd like to call the meeting back to order, and just in terms of scheduling, we're going to try to be finished by 3, so we have a half an hour to go here. And Dennis has said he'll move this presentation along, and we'll. Jim?
Well, thank you very much. I just want to note that we have made some progress on some of these things. Maria, thank you for mentioning that. We have. No question. Just note on the portal, it is available now at My Future Alaska. I highlighted it in an op-ed that was published here this week. And again, calendar, GERs, course blocks work has been moving forward in those areas. But there are many, many other areas where we can, I think, make some positive effect. And so hence bringing Dennis here to talk with us about some things we're working on, but also his take from what's happening across the country to provide a seamless student experience, one that reduces the barriers to student success. This is an issue that we face, but all institutions across the country face. What can we learn about what's going on across the country? Thank you, Dennis, and welcome.
Okay, and in the interest of time, I will be quick. But, having listened to the conversation today, it's clear to me that even in the best of your budget circumstances, you're going to have to change the way that you deliver educational services, that business as usual is not an option. And having said that, Jim asked me to say, what are the characteristics of a student experience that should be pursued regardless of what kind of changes you make? So there's nothing in what I'm going to suggest that says do it this way or do it that way. But I think there are some criteria that you have to keep in mind that says whatever you do, keep this in mind. And the bottom line objective is to maximize the benefits of higher education in this state to the students, to the employers, to the communities, and the state of Alaska generally through the most effective possible deployment of people and other assets of the University of Alaska system. So how do you use the assets you have to best serve the people of the state? And having said that, the real question is when you start facing the kinds of budget issues that I know you're facing, there'll be lots of tactical decisions to be made. And I'm just encouraging you to stand back and say, be strategic about this. When you get done doing all the things that you have to do, leave the students in a better place than they are now, not in a worse place. And so with that, I would just say that what I'm going to tell you very quickly is that these are my notions of what the university's client should expect of you. They were compiled after the last meeting with the chancellors and the president's staff. It hasn't been vetted with anybody. I sent these off. I've not been part of any conversation. I'm sure the list could be improved, but I think it's a good starting place. And so with that, a couple of points that are on the slides, and for those on the phone, slide 24. I guess having listened to the conversation about education, about the education program, and what you're struggling with to accommodate that and respond to that issue, what I'm about to say raises the bar because it starts to apply those concerns and issues to all programs being offered at the university. Having said that, I would say that at the end of the day, students in all parts of the state should have access to the full array of academic programs offered by the University of Alaska system. To Regent Hargrave's point about cutting back and et cetera, I'm going to argue that it's not about removing access points to higher education. It's about delivering education to those points in a very different way. But you have to, I think, as a public university, as the public university in the state, serve all the people of the state. And that's a particular issue given geography, size, population, and transportation issues. There are some difficulties with some of the technical programs that are heavily hands-on, specialized equipment, and et cetera, that are hard to do by distance education, online education, but there are also ways to accommodate that that have been found. I think that students have to be provided with student support services everywhere. I mean, we're talking about necessarily moving to something that looks like much more of a high-tech delivery model, but there has to be a high-touch part of that to help students succeed. And that means that their student support services have to be provided on the ground in all parts of the state where education is delivered. If I go through, I guess I didn't intend to, but in a lot of ways I'm channeling Regent Anderson at the next point here, because in order to be a user-friendly institution, there's got to be a series of things. And there are, and I would point as an example of this to Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, two institutions that sit in the same on the same campus. The student sees no distinction between the two. The student is going to an institution. All of the issues that I'm about to list are handled behind the curtain. So the student sees one admission process. They see a single point of contact for student financial aid. They don't have to go to two different places. There is no requirement for separate admission to the two institutions that reside in that place. There's a seamless transfer of courses. I mean, they operate out of literally the same catalog. There are guided pathways, and by that I mean once a student picks a major, the student is given very clear direction as to what courses and what sequence of courses they need to take to get to the end of their program. There's not a lot of false starts, and that means, I grew up as an engineer way back when, and when I decided I was going to be an engineer of this kind, I knew for the next 4 years what my curriculum was going to look like. It was in the catalog every year. That it was just laid out. And I had a lot of choice about program, but once the program was picked, the choices went away. The faculty knew more about what I needed than I did. So given a lot of choice wasn't an option. There was a general education core. You've dealt with some of that, and common course numbering and standard course blocks. You've been fighting these issues for a long time, but these are issues that have to get resolved. I mean, these can't be put off any longer because they are all resource-consuming issues. If you don't get over the hurdles, there are costs associated to the students, to the system, to the inability for students to move among and between institutions and programs. I would argue that there needs to be a single point of contact for employers when they say we are interested in looking for additional education for our employees. There's a single 800 number. That's an old-fashioned way of coming at it, but there's a single place where they say, I'm looking for this, where the university gets back to them with somebody who is knowledgeable about the program in which they're interested. You shouldn't put it on the backs of the employers and the consumer to try to figure out the path through your university and how to respond to their requests. World-class research, you're doing a lot of it, and I'm just going to argue that most of that needs to be done in the context of research institutes. For the simple reason it's more directed, it's more focused, it's more problem-based, and it lets, it removes from everybody the responsibility to be doing research, because all that does is scatter time and effort of people in often less productive ways. Courses in Gen Ed will have to be re-engineered as hybrid courses in ways that can be delivered across the system. I mean, I think it would be really useful to take a look at the Gen Ed courses you offer and ask the question, how are the students voting with their feet, if you will, about which of those courses are really the Gen Ed curriculum you're offering? I worked with an institution not long ago that had 800 courses eligible for Gen Ed credit. When you started taking a look at what courses really mattered, it was fewer than 70. The students were really taking and putting together as their Gen Ed curriculum. The others could easily be jettisoned. Yes. I mean, by hybrid, it means part of it's done electronically, part of it's done face to face. Okay. So that, there's still faculty contact directly, but also half of the course time is spent doing things electronically. And the National Center for Academic Transformation has for years demonstrated that for large introductory courses and etc., you can get better educational results, and they've measured this over and over again in a wide variety of courses at about 40% less cost than we typically expend on those kinds of courses. There are ways to do it cheaper and better, I'm saying. Institutional missions are going to have to be further delineated to ensure that there's less overlap, and this is going to be a major issue always. But I argue this on the basis of, regardless of economic realities in your budget process, one of the major considerations has to be maintenance of quality. And the more you keep focused on those places that can maintain quality in various programs and assign different institutions leadership in those programs, the more likely you are to not have quality eroded just by having programs eroded away a little bit at a time in the face of getting budget whacks. And then you're already doing these back office functions are going to have to be centralized, and at the same time, specialists centrally, generalists close to the customer, so that there's kind of one-stop shops for students to see the kinds of student services they need. And our experience is that 80 or 90% of the questions students have can be answered by those kinds of generalists. There's always the few questions that stump the generalists, and that's where the specialist needs to be available, but a telephone or an email will answer it. It doesn't have to be a specialist everywhere for every site and for every topic. And that, throughout this, that the general pattern for staffing, administrative, and student services will put generalists closest to the clients, whether that's a student or another staff member, and the specialists are there to make sure that the generalists have most of the information most of the time, but to backstop them when they need to be. And I'm pretty close to having done it in 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
The one thing that I would just end with is that everything I've said will require much greater clarity regarding institutional mission and distinctiveness. Will require high levels of collaboration. I mean, you talked about this at all levels within the system. We haven't talked about this one, and it's maybe one of the most important things. There needs to be a policy ecosystem that creates incentives for and rewards for this level of collaboration. I mean, it cannot be a set of one-offs. You talked about it on the tuition side. I'm going to argue you got to back up and say you need a whole new resource allocation model in order to create an environment in which this level of collaboration can, in fact, be fostered. Because everything about resource allocation in higher education presumes competition. And dependence on tuition even forces that. And then, you know, at the end of the day, you got to put students and the people of Alaska at the center of this, not the employees of the university and not the institutions. Now I'll quit.
Thank you.
Sorry for dumping such a big load in such a short time.
No, I think these are good overview considerations that we're going to have to keep focused on as we move through a variety of conversations. So I appreciate that.
I do think that, well, thank you. And I wish more Regents were present to hear this, to remind us of the work that we started with you a few years ago. But I appreciate you reminding us that we have to do business differently and that we do have our tools in our toolbox. This is the way that we look at our resources and how we utilize those resources and allocate the resources. So I think it's important, President Johnson, that as we move forward with our budget discussions, that we remind ourselves of this conversation, and so we don't get lost, you know, in sometimes in the moment, that we ensure that we have the that we ensure that we're diligent about stepping back and remembering what the long-term strategic value is and how we could best leverage and utilize our roles as Regents. And we do that through strategic budgeting and really identifying what's most important for the institution and what's most important to the students in the long term. So I think that it would be good to have a very simple frame of this as we go into the June meeting as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Don't see any other questions or comments. So, Regent Purdue.
Yes, as we move forward on the seamless issues, it would be helpful once we have a picture of our priorities and how much we might want to undertake in this area, to give ourselves a grade or some kind of sense of how far along the continuum we are. I'm looking at 4A through G, for instance. I have no idea. You know, are some of these attainable in the next 3 years? Are some of them attainable tomorrow? Are some of them attainable in the next decade? I don't know if that's the right measure, but some understanding of the level of difficulty for these items. I hesitate to ask for that if we're not going to, if we're going to be in such a situation that we can't do these refinements. We're in a very serious financial situation. But if we do believe that we're going to be taking these on, then I think it would be helpful to have some sense of the level of achievement that we can make.
I think that's a really good suggestion. As Dennis suggests, and I agree, maybe the time it takes us to move in these and make these improvements varies by budget, but that we need to move in these areas is not an option. We definitely must do that, and it's by making improvements here that we'll be able to, I think, achieve more and depend less. We'll generate more enrollments. I'm confident of that if we can make this student experience more streamlined and more convenient. It doesn't say that we're going to make the rigor of our academic programs anything less than they are, if anything greater. But I think these processes really do need to be cleaned up. Okay. And I suspect that there are lots of people across the university system in these areas who would say, about time. Let's do it. I mean, we have a lot of really skilled and committed people across the university system in these areas who would, I think, really want to be in a place where they can contribute to improvement and achieve our purpose and our mission. They want to be part of it. So, thank you.
Let's go to structural considerations.
Okay. On to these structural considerations here. I do not plan to go into a lot of detail in this discussion here. You've seen a variant of this slide in previous meetings. These are examples of structural options that we might look at administratively and then as a board. I think these really are, though, board matters. No question about it. We can certainly do analysis and identify benefits and risks and implications of these various options for the board. The board has made these decisions over the years. In the mid-70s, the board moved from a university to 3 universities. In the late 80s, the board pulled the community campuses in and made them part of our regional universities. And there's been, of course, a lot of discussion about should we move to a single accreditation? Should we have 3 universities with no statewide? What should we do with the community campuses? Should we just not bother with the structural stuff and focus in on maybe the student experience issues that Dennis has just shared with us? So there's a lot there. And again, our focus at this point administratively is on the budget and on continuing to improve our processes, the other things that we've talked about today. But I think this is board business, if you will, and I put it out here just to raise it up to you, not to recommend an approach at all. We're certainly not prepared for that, not to ask you for a decision. There's a lot of complexity in this. There's a lot of time it would take to move through and really think through this. But I think it is important that you are aware of these options before you, and then that supports your ability to discuss these things, assess these things, and move forward. So those are my only comments on this slide. Thank you.
Well, I think that this is really an issue that the board has to begin to wrap its arms around. We have to figure out some mechanism by which we can have these conversations so that this isn't the type of decision that we're going to be able to announce in one meeting and then make a decision the following month. There's just an enormous amount of homework that needs to be done and evaluation to fairly evaluate this. But I do think it's urgent that we begin that process because of the requests that we're getting from the legislature, and because as we've and there are voices, pulling one direction and voices pulling the other direction, and I think that we're going to have to eventually come to making a decision so that we can focus our energies in some pathway, whatever that is. So what I think and I think it's really crucial that we begin that process so that we can send the message to everyone, but especially to the legislature, that we hear their concerns, that this is an important issue that we take on. And so I would like to propose that we have that we appoint a task force or a blue ribbon panel to begin the process of consideration of these things, to begin to assemble the data, the background information that's required, and to be a sounding board for various constituencies around the state to hear those concerns, and then to bring back some considerations or recommendations if they feel like they can get to that point by our September meeting, so that we can begin to have some more data, some more input structured on the question of what should the university look like. So, and I'm thinking of a smaller group, not a huge task force that's got a representative from every stakeholder around the country, but a fairly high level board that could that's very familiar with the university, that's tuned into the statewide to the whole system, and which can be very transparent in its process and reach out to various stakeholders and get input, but then to assemble all that in some way that we can begin to digest that and take a hold of it as the board, and not coming from the president, but from us, and working from our point of view about how best to move the university forward, because I think that is a question that we're going to face, and I think the sooner that we start to systematically face that, the better, and that we can have a more thoughtful process of engaging both with the community and amongst ourselves on discussing this question, because it's not something that we can decide, like I said, quickly. It's going to be something that we need to very systematically move forward on to get to a point where we're comfortable with making a decision. So, is there any discussion about that or any thoughts on that, how we might do that?
I do think that it's such a large issue that, having a small group of individuals look at the issue, ensuring that the most strategic question is framed, and then reporting that information back to the board is going to be important. So I support you in this, and if you would like, I'd make a motion. And I believe the motion would state that you would appoint the task force. Is that correct? So that that we authorize you as chair to convene a special task force comprised of Alaska leaders to look at options for the university's organizational structure and to report its findings and recommendations to the board. And by what date would you like to do that?
By our September meeting, I think.
By September.
And it may be that, that needs to be modified a little bit, but at least a progress report by September.
Okay. So I make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Sherry. I'll second the motion, and I would be interested in being involved in that, Chair Davies.
Thank you very much. Okay, any discussion about this approach? Regent Purdue.
I can see that this board doesn't have the capacity on the schedule that we have to focus in on this issue. I don't really know why it keeps coming up as, both the single accreditation and the whole community campus issue, why that's the focus. I think that there must be a belief that it saves money or something like that in this environment. But I know there have been a lot of knowledgeable people who've looked at a subset of these questions over time. So I guess I would see that this could be somewhat of a meta-analysis of the work that's already been done. I don't have the time to go and find all those reports, absorb all of them and integrate them in my. I would appreciate having that, and as long as the charge is such that the decision is really with this board.
Yep.
I think that's just crucial that we not
right.
That we not turn such a fundamental decision over to somebody else. But I could really see the advantage of getting the work that's been done already crystallized. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? So, Brandy, could you call the roll on the motion then, please?
RegentTuber?
Yes.
Regent Beretta?
Yes.
Regent Anderson? Regent Parker?
Yes.
Regent Hughes? Regent O'Neill?
Yes.
Regent Sweet?
Yes.
Regent Hargraves?
Yes.
Regent Purdue?
Yes.
Regent Banya? Regent Davies?
Yes.
8 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that. So I'll move forward fairly quickly to get back to the board with some structure for this and hopefully some names that we can consider. I'm going to appoint them, right? But if you have thoughts on that, of course, you can get them to me. All right, Jim. Last thoughts.
No, I think there is the matter of the schedule for the June 6-7 meeting. I know we're bumping up against the time.
Do you want to? Why don't you outline how you see that meeting?
Well, it's here, as you've seen. We have the committee agendas here for meetings on the 30th and the 31st, and then the main.
I mean, mostly. I'm sorry, the schedule's there, but most the consideration with the budget.
Yeah, I mean, the plan basically is if we have a budget, well, we'll talk about budget in any case, no question about it. If we're lucky enough to have a budget from the governor at that point, we will ask you for approval of it. On June 6th, and then our plan on June 7th would be the board retreat. And we've adopted this new approach over the last year and found it to be beneficial because it's really in the June-July timeframe that we begin planning for the subsequent year. I would call out just one thing that is perhaps different or special here, and that is that this is the 20th anniversary of the UA Scholars Program, and so we're proposing that a reception be held that evening to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this really important scholarship program for Alaskans. And so that's the one thing that would be a little bit different from the format of previous meetings. But I think the importance of that program, I think, justifies that departure from our agenda and having a little bit of a celebration.
Okay. It's day and a half. Yeah.
We learn.
Regent Purdue.
I have a subject that I would like us to queue up. I don't know if it needs to be in June, probably not. But I think you raised the scholars and the dependence we have on the Natural Resource Fund, or what's the right word for that? The Natural Resource Fund.
What is it?
And the university lands issue that you're putting leadership into. I guess I would, as a regent, appreciate having a briefing on that effort and our reasonable expectations in terms of revenue, in terms of what the long term versus short term, because I think as the message gets out in the communities more. We want to be realistic about what it is that the fund does for us today, and what it can do for us in the next 5 years and the next 25 years. And so it's a long-winded way of saying I'd like a briefing on the university lands issue.
We can do that in June relatively easily. Thank you.
So So are there any other agenda suggestions that we want to put on right now? Okay, not hearing none. Let's close with a quick round of Regents' comments. Regent Hargrave.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid that when this legislative session started, I had a very pessimistic view of the university's funding for the future. I think we're seeing a much more positive, better situation than I ever anticipated. And I think that comes from the extremely great administration and management of our president, for one, his top team, for two, and for the support of community members that have jumped out of the head of the thing and seeing to it that it's happening. I just can't relate fully how much progress I've seen made here. And it comes from a fantastic ability to administer, to manage. It comes from a communications department that beats anything I think I've ever seen. So there are lots of people to be commended, and for that I'm optimistic and very, very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Perdue.
That's a really wonderful sentiment. The only issue I'd want to add is, of course, the graduations, and I want to thank Chancellor White and Chancellor Sandine for hosting fantastic graduations that I got to attend, and it's I think it's just so essential for us to do those graduations and to see the hope that we are providing Alaskans as we do this tough work. It's really important to see what difference we're making, or really our faculty are making. Thank you.
Regina Neal.
Well, thank you, Chancellor Sandine, for hosting us. Always appreciate having the meetings here. And I want to welcome Maria in her role. It's going to be wonderful to work with you. Look forward to it. I also I support the comments made by Regent Hargroves. I think you've done a great job in summarizing the work of the staff, and just want to acknowledge the amount of time and effort and energy that is probably taken in Juneau this year. And so I want to just thank you, Michelle, for all of your work that you do on behalf of the university and so many roles that you've held in supporting the institution, and also commend you, President Johnson, on your leadership and keeping it together, and hoping that you're practicing your yoga every morning, that you get up and breathing deeply, keeping everything into perspective. Gotta keep it in perspective, right? So, and thanks for letting me tease you a little bit, because it's always good to have humor as well. But thank you for the meeting today.
Thank you. Regent Parker.
I will concur with the remarks of Regent Hargraves, Perdue, and O'Neill. And thank you, Chancellor Sandine, and welcome, Maria.
Okay. Regent Sweet.
Yeah, I concur with all the previous remarks, particularly the point on the legislative session and the optimism that we feel versus today versus the pessimism we felt going into it. And I think it is owed, as Regent Hargraves said, to the hard work and dedication of the president and his team. I'm very thankful to have been a part of this board. It's not quite my last meeting. The ASA committee meeting lined up on the 30th will be my last official meeting. But, as I look forward to what the next couple of years might look like, I don't yet, know exactly who my successor will be in the student regent position, but we've got 3 very strong candidates. And I've been in communication with each of them about sort of the direction of the university and where we want to go and where we have been. So I'm hoping to pass a baton here shortly to somebody who will carry it with pride. I took over for Regent Lucasen, and for those of you who knew her, she'd been the student body president. She'd been deeply involved in student government for a number of years. There was nothing about the university she didn't know. And so I felt like it was very difficult to sort of match her level of knowledge. And so hopefully, I feel like I've been able to do the best that I can in this role, and to whoever succeeds me, I'm hoping to, like I said before, pass the baton off with as much competence going forward as possible. We're going to need a strong voice for students as we make these very, very painful and tough decisions going forward. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Tuber?
I don't have anything of value to add, but I appreciate the efforts of everybody today, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Great. Thank you very much. Regent Beretta?
Thank you. So I apologize for being 3 hours late for the meeting. For some reason, I had it in my phone. I am out in Coquitlam teaching first going to high school students within the town. There's about 35 of them. And as I think about the graduation that I attended on the blur Sunday, and then these kids thinking about what they're going to do with their future. The conversations that we had in regards to the budget are so critically important to their future and the future of the state. And I think about some of the comments that were made as far as the investment that things were made in their education. I really think we just have such a huge responsibility, and these challenging times really make us need to step up and do our best to do the right thing for these kids. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I look forward to meeting in person. These special meetings are difficult schedule-wise and to be on teleconference. So I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to talk in person about some of these critical issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor White?
Thank you, and you know, I always like to focus on the positive, and I think we've commencement, as Regent Perdue pointed out, offers us an opportunity to celebrate the 600 UAF students that walked across the stage in Fairbanks, as well as the UAA students that walked across the stage in Fairbanks. The same was true out in Bethel, and Regent Parker was able to join us out there. So lots of great work that's being done by people every day at the university. Thank you.
Chancellor Sandine.
I really have nothing to add. You know, I could talk about our commencement too, but many people have already talked about it. It was great, and we're going out to Kenai River campus tonight.
Oh, great.
Overseas.
Good.
So
I'm glad.
the work continues. Thank you.
Right. Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had very successful commencement events in Sitka, Ketchikan, and Juneau. 650 awards, degrees to students, great celebration of student success. And we also had a very successful site visit from the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities about a week ago. We've seen the draft report, which included 5 commendations and 3 recommendations. So we were very pleased about the outcome of that. Kudos to our Provost Karen Carey, who did a terrific job of organizing our efforts. Look forward to the commission meeting in June and formalizing their final action on that Northwest Commission accreditation, but it was a very positive visit. And a lot of smiles on the faces of our students and their family members. So thanks to Regent Anderson and Regent Bania, who made the effort to be present at those commencement events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank Chancellor Sandine and the rest of the staff here for hosting us down here. It's always a great pleasure to be here. Just a very vibrant campus and good place to be. And also I want to echo the comments about the graduations. I was able to attend a graduation at Fort Wainwright, where we had 1 student from UAF, and a graduation at UAF where we had essentially over 1,000 students that were graduating, and it just reminds us what this is all about, and it's such a wonderful time to hear all the excitement and the plans for the future and the sense of pride that students have in finishing a particular course of action. So I appreciate that, but I would just want it, by extension, to send that out to all the faculty and staff and that work so hard all the time to make that happen. It's just, we tend to focus here on a lot of the contentious issues. They rise up to our plate, but there's a lot of really good work that's being done across the state. It was just remarkable. We gave an honorary degree to a woman that wasn't able to come to school and felt like she'd lost her reason for living almost because she wasn't able to come. And it was just remarkable. The entire auditorium in the Carlson Center, probably 4,000 people stood up to applaud her for being there and for the work that she's done, Reverend Frank. It just shows you what a beacon and what a important purpose that we have overall for this institution. And so I really appreciate the work that everybody here does to advance that. So thank you. President Johnson, you want to have a last quick word, or shall we adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.